Welcome, my friends! Consider the equation x squared is equal to 64. Now, you probably already know this, but the way to cancel something raised to the second power, like we have here with x, is to take the square root of both sides. What some students forget is that anytime you introduce a square root into a problem, you have to include a plus or minus on whatever you are taking the square root of. So we have x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 64. The reason we need plus or minus is that there are generally two numbers that can be squared, both a positive and a negative number, that will result in any given positive number. In this case, the square root of 64 is 8, meaning either 8 squared or negative 8 squared will result in 64. So our answer is x equals plus or minus 8. If you have something squared equaling a negative number, such as x squared is equal to negative 64, then there is no solution if we are excluding imaginary numbers. There is no real number that can be squared that will result in a negative number. Let's try x squared is equal to 48. Taking the square root on both sides, we have x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 48. We can break the square root of 48 into a product involving a perfect square. 48 is the same thing as 16 times 3. The square root of 16 is just 4, so this can be rewritten as x is equal to plus or minus 4 times the square root of 3, which is our final answer. How about x plus 2 squared minus 63 is equal to 0? We need to isolate the square onto one side of the equation before we can apply the square root. First, we add 63 to both sides, which leaves us with x plus 2 squared is equal to 63. Next, we can take the square root of both sides to get x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 63. Now we can subtract 2 from both sides of the equation, but you have to make sure that you write the negative 2 before the plus or minus sign. We can rewrite the square root of 63 as the product of 9 times 7. We know that the square root of 9 is 3, so we have x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus 3 times the square root of 7, which is our final answer. Alright, my friends, that finishes our video related to solving quadratic equations using the square root property.